Here are my way too early predictions for Maryland football next year.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today we are going to be predicting the Maryland schedule for next year going into the fall. And it's an interesting schedule. It's a different type of schedule. But before we do that, happy Friday to everybody. I hope that you guys had a good week and are going into a weekend in good spirits and in good moods. I know I've had a good weekend. I'm hoping that everyone else has had a good week as well. But let's talk about the Maryland football schedule and let's predict the Maryland schedule for the 2024 season for Maryland football. It's an interesting year with a lot of different teams. We have new teams that we're playing this year that we don't normally get to play in the Big Ten. We get Oregon, we get USC, we get the new people coming from the Pac-12. And so it's an interesting year. It's a big year for the Big Ten. And so I've kind of done a little bit to this. I've said, what's the most important game of our season? How many wins can we get? What's our ceiling? What's our lowest point? I want to actually predict what we're going to do in this new age of the new Big Ten. And I think this year is going to be a big indicator of how the new Big Ten is and how well does it work and how does Maryland fit into it? Are we still kind of around the same spot, middle-ish, upper middle-ish of the Big Ten under Coach Loxley? Or do we take a new low? There's no Talia this year. There's a whole lot of different things this year. And I think it'll be interesting to see kind of where I think that we lie. But let's get into it. So we start at UConn August 31st, 12 p.m. I'm not going to say like a huge game, but it's a big game because it's our first game of the season at home. I think some of the spreads have already been posted for that UConn game. I want to say we're 26-point favorites. And so I'm looking at the UConn game and I'm saying there's not really a shot that I think we lose that game. I don't think there's really any opportunity for us to lose that game. If we lost that game, we'd be in trouble. That we should start the season 1-0. UConn's a basketball school, like I've talked about. If we lose to UConn in basketball, okay, that's fair. But in football, we should have no business losing to UConn. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on with UConn right now with Dan Hurley, their basketball coach, and some of the talks about him potentially taking the Lakers job. And there's some interesting kind of stuff going on over there. But in terms of on the football side of things, there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff going on between Maryland and UConn. I think this is a warm-up game. I think this is a fairly light game. And I think this is a game that Maryland football should pretty easily win. It's a game that I don't really see any shot of us winning. Our percentage of winning this game should probably be like 80-90%. There's really no shot that we lose this game unless something insane happens or we turn over the ball like 4 or 5 times and somehow UConn finds their way into the game. But other than that, like, we're beating UConn. We start the year 1-0. You schedule that type of game to start the right way, and I think it'll be a good start. I think we'll be happy at home, and we start the year 1-0. Next game on the schedule, I've argued that it's one of the biggest games of the year against Michigan State at home. September 7th, 3:30 game. It's an interesting game against Michigan State. And I don't know exactly what Michigan State is this year. They've got new players. They've got a new coach, no more Mel Tucker, and they've got a different kind of vibe to them, it seems like Michigan State. And Michigan State's football has had some good moments at times a couple of years ago. They've been a decent team at times, and so I think they've got some transfers. I think they've got a better team, and it's going to be interesting to see. They have a new quarterback, the Aiden kid. He's a transfer. I'm curious about how good he is, but I don't want to say we lose this game at home, but I think this game's really a toss-up game, to be completely honest. And we have a new quarterback as well. They have this transfer from Oregon State, Aiden, that's supposed to be a pretty good player. And so I go back and forth about this game, but I'm going to go ahead and say that with the new quarterback, with the inexperience we have, I'm going to say that we dropped this one. I don't know why. I just have a feeling that Michigan State's going to test us. It's going to be an interesting game, and I'm going to predict that we drop it. I could be wrong, but I'm going to say that we drop this game against Michigan State and we start the year 1-1, headed to Virginia, who should be a better team this year under Tony Elliott. They should be a little bit better. We play them at night, actually, at Virginia. And I think we beat Virginia. I think we're a little bit better than them. I think we get a wake-up call against Michigan State where things didn't go the right way. Our quarterback play gets waked up. And I think we have a better game, a less sluggish game against Virginia on the road at night in prime time, a really important game on our schedule. And I think we start the year 2-1 after beating UConn and Virginia, but losing to Michigan State. And then we play another gimme game. There's not too much to say about this. It's similar to the UConn game. We play Villanova. Should be a pretty light type of win. Again, a school that if you lose to in basketball, it's like, okay. But if you lose to in football, you're in trouble if you're losing to Villanova in football as a Maryland program, at least. Maybe some of the other schools, it's okay. But as a Maryland program, as a Maryland football team, you shouldn't be losing to Villanova. So unless something miraculous happens, like I said, with UConn, I think Villanova's a win. And we start the year 3-1, beating Virginia, Villanova, and UConn. And then we're headed to Indiana on the road. Another interesting game. I honestly think we beat Indiana. I think that we're better than Indiana. I think that they haven't been very good the last couple of years, but I think we beat Indiana pretty handily to start the year 5-1. I just think we're better than Indiana at this point. And I think we beat them. 4-1, excuse me, with the loss to Michigan State. Not 5-1 quite, but we go to Northwestern comes to us, another night game, it says, at a chance for us to get to 5-1. And so Northwestern's interesting. They have a culture shift with their new head coach, and it seems like he did do a really good job last year. And they were heading into the kind of the back end a little bit of our schedule. Northwestern game's pretty interesting, a night game. I think we beat Northwestern at home to head to 5-1. I do. I think we beat them at home. I don't think they beat us. I think we are at 5-1. And so that's not a bad start. If we start the year 5-1, beating losing to Michigan State, beating Virginia, beating Indiana, beating Northwestern, I think Maryland fans would take that. I think that's not too far off of what I think will happen. This is what I think will happen, but I don't think that's far off from being a really good start. Obviously, you want to beat Michigan State at home, but it's going to be hard for us not to drop any of these games with new quarterback play and a lot of new players in starting positions and without our longtime quarterback. So I think starting 5-1 through our first 6 is not bad. And then so we move on to USC. USC is interesting now. We get USC at home, but we know they do have a lot of talent. My concern might not be their defense as much as it is stopping them. I think they have a lot of guys that are going to make it hard to stop in terms of offensive weapons and Lincoln Riley and what he does. I think it'll be hard to stop USC, and I think that they outmatch us a little bit and beat us at home to move us to 5-2. And so this back half of the schedule is definitely the harder part of the schedule. So I think we move to 5-2. And here's the thing. You get Minnesota, then Oregon. You don't want to lose 3 straight here. And I think that's possible. You go to Minnesota on the road and you don't want to make this 3 straight losses. But knowing Maryland football, I think it's entirely possible that we go on a little losing skid. And I'm going to say that we lose to Minnesota to move to 5-3, a Minnesota team that I think that we're honestly probably just a little bit better than, but I think that we just lose our confidence against USC and it piles on with a loss against Minnesota. That's how I think it happens. And then we head to Oregon and we lose another one to move to 5-3 on the year. And that's what I think. I think Oregon's better than us. I don't think that's too much of a debate. I think with Dylan Gabriel and some of their weapons, I think that they're better than us, but I think that Oregon beats us pretty clearly in Eugene. I don't think that's an entirely crazy thing to say at all. And now I'm going to get to the Rutgers game. Last 3 games of the year, Rutgers, Iowa, Penn State. So a lot of how we end this year is going to depend on how we do against these schools. And I'm going to say this. I think we beat Rutgers. I do. I think Rutgers is supposed to be better this year or whatever, but I'm still not super high on them, and I think we beat them to move to 6-3. Not a bad spot to be 6-3. Let me make sure I counted this. Let me make sure I've counted this right. We beat UConn, beat Virginia. That's 2 wins. We beat Villanova. That's 3 wins. We beat Indiana. That's 4 wins. We beat Northwestern. That's 5 wins. And then we beat Rutgers. That's 6 wins. Yeah. So then we would have lost 3 or 4 games. So to be 6-4, excuse me, we would have lost to USC. We would have lost to Minnesota. We would have lost to Oregon, and we would have lost to. We had a loss to Michigan State. So 6-4 headed into the Rutgers game, and I think we beat Rutgers to move to 7-4, to move to 7-4, which I think is a decent spot to be. Excuse me, Rutgers would put me at 6-4. It's hard to talk and do the math, but I just grinded out the math real quick to make sure I was doing it right. So the Rutgers game will put us at 6-4, which makes sense. 10 games done. You have 2 more to get to 12 games. And I think we beat Iowa and their broken offense at home to move to 7-4. And then I think we lose to Penn State to make us 7-5. I think that's about right. It sounds 7 wins seems to be about where we should be. I could see us going a little bit lower, going maybe down to 6 wins and even potentially 5. But I think 7 wins, I could also see us getting up to 8. I don't think that's a bad spot for us. And I think that's about where we are as a team. I'm going to give out some bold takes, some takes that you guys might be like, that's crazy, that Maryland football could potentially have next year. I will talk about that after this ad from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships, and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. I'm going to give you a couple of bold takes this year for Maryland football, and these aren't necessarily exactly true, but I think there are things that they're bold, but I think that there's some things that could have some truth in them that could potentially end up actually coming true and coming into fruition. And I'm going to start with Nolan Ray leads us in all-purpose yards next year. This is I would say it's a pretty bold take, but here's my thinking. A lot of people think Nolan Ray is going to be the surprise. He's going to challenge a lot of people, going to challenge Roman Hemby for running back 1, and is going to get a lot of carries next year, and he's too explosive of a threat not to play. And I agree with a lot of people that say that, and I think that he's a really good player. I don't know if he quite challenges Roman Hemby, but he will have to kind of overtake Roman Hemby if this is true. But I think that Nolan Ray ends up playing so well. This is a bold take. I'm not saying it's necessarily true, but my thing is I think there's a shot at this happening, that he just surpasses expectations so much, and he ends up playing at a really high level where Maryland and football and Coach Loxley, they decided we have to play this kid more, and slowly but surely he ends up being the running back 1, and he And I think he gets a lot of just all-purpose yards and ends up leading the Maryland team in all-purpose yards. I'm telling you, this kid's explosive. This kid's a really great runner, and I think he's going to be a really good player. And he's going to be able to get receiving yards. He's going to be able to get yards on through the tackle. He's going to be able to do so many different things, and I think that it's a bold take for sure, but it's something that could end up becoming true possibly. I really do believe that. I don't wish injury on anybody, but especially if some injuries start to rack up, don't be surprised if Nolan Ray leads us in all-purpose yards. It's a bold take for sure, but all I'm saying is don't be surprised if it ends up happening, if something like that would end up happening for Maryland football. My next bold take is that Cameron Edge ends up taking over the starting quarterback role. It's a bold take, and I'm not saying this happens either, but I could see a world where MJ Morris and Billy Edwards come in and are struggling, and Cameron Edge comes in and plays better. I could see it happening where Maryland's searching for answers. We start the year really poorly. Like I'm talking about a loss. I just talked about the Maryland schedule, but I'm saying we lose to Michigan State. We beat UConn, but we don't look that good doing it. We lose to Virginia, and Maryland's looking for somebody else at the quarterback room. Maybe he gave MJ and Billy a chance, and Cameron Edge comes in and plays at a high level. I don't think it's insane to say I like Cam's game. I think he's methodical. I feel like he knows what he's doing. I feel like he's a pretty good player throwing the football, and so I'm looking at it and I'm saying I think Cam Edge has a chance, maybe if those two guys struggle early on, to potentially play early for Maryland football. And I could see a world where it happens. Might be a crazy take. You might think that he's third right now on the depth chart, but don't be surprised. Look at what happened last year in Alabama's quarterback room. Yes, eventually Jalen Milroe took the job and did what he needed to do. But at first, if you remember, Jalen Milroe got benched and Tyler Buckner and their other guy got a shot in that quarterback room. Just about everybody got a shot. And maybe it doesn't happen like that, but I don't think it's crazy to say when you have like a quarterback battle like this with a bunch of guys without really any experience and a bunch of one guy that's new to the system, two guys that have been there before but haven't done maybe what you want. And don't be surprised if Cam Edge ends up getting into the competition during the year. Now, my next bold take is a pretty bold one, but I'm going to say that Dylan Wade leads our team in receptions, not necessarily yards, but Dylan Wade leads our team in receptions. Now, this isn't going to be easy to do, but all I've heard about, and I know I talk about it, I feel like every single day, is Dylan Wade this, Dylan Wade that. Dylan Wade has looked really good. And the freshman going into his sophomore year sounds like he's got things figured out and is poised to have a huge season. And this is a bold take because we have Caden Prather and Ty Felton and Preston Howard and Roman Hemby taking up catches. And I just said Nolan Ray could do the same thing. And I know. It's not going to be easy. But here's a world where I could see Dylan Wade having a really good rapport with MJ Morris. I saw MJ Morris firing a really nice ball to Dylan Wade in the spring game. And so I think it's entirely possible that Dylan Wade takes on kind of the tight end one in terms of receiving, just based off what I've heard he's been able to do, and not lead our team in receiving yards, but in receptions. I could see him being really good in third downs. I could see him being really good on thirds and 8s and 7s and 9s. I could see him doing a really good job operating from that tight end room. I could see him doing that. And so I'm going to predict a bold take of mine, and these aren't like things that I think are going to happen, but I'm just saying a couple bold takes, some things that maybe people aren't thinking about, but I think they could potentially happen, that Dylan Wade leads us in receptions. And so those are my couple of bold takes. Cameron Edge eventually takes over the starting role. I think Nolan Ray leads us in all-purpose yards, and then as well as Dylan Wade leading our team in receptions. Let me know you guys' bold takes. Please let me know what you guys think is a bold take for this year. Again, I don't want you guys to think I'm saying this is going to come true. Just a couple things I think are possible and a couple things that I think could potentially happen for Maryland football. Who will lead Maryland football in interceptions, next year for the Terps? We'll talk about that right now. So what DB will lead the Terps in interceptions this year for Maryland football? I think this is always an interesting type of topic. It's just something fun to do to end on a Friday. So in terms of last year, if you guys remember, this was our leaders in interceptions. Tarheeb still had 5. Glendon Miller had 4. Dante had 2. And if you guys remember, Donnell Brown ended up getting 2 as well. Barham had 1. Gote had 1. Bo Braid had got 1. And Scruggs, the DB, got 1 as well. And so who is going to lead us in interceptions this year? Now that Tarheeb still is gone, and as well as Jaquan Shepard is gone as well, who will lead this team in interceptions? You got to look in the cornerback room first. Perry Fisher, I think, has a pretty good shot at doing it for Maryland football. When I think about Perry Fisher, I think that he's 6'3", he's got length, he's got the ability to cover, and I think that when you talk about 50-50 balls and those type of things, Perry Fisher starting on the outside corner, if you give him a 50-50 ball, he's going to have a chance to go up and get it and make plays with his length and his athleticism in the back end. I think he might be my leader for interceptions, but some of the other guys as well, you got to think about too. Jalen Husky's interesting. How could Jalen Husky lead us in interceptions? He had one last year against J.J. McCarthy. I think Jalen Husky does a pretty good job with the ball. As well as I think Dante Trader, you got to put up there just playmaking from the safety spot and do what he does in terms of in the back end and playmaking. He'll also probably come up in the box a little bit, as well as Glendon Miller. Like I said, Glendon Miller was second on our teams in interceptions last year with 4 from the slot. So it's an interesting thing, and I kind of want to go into this. Kind of goes into my bold take. Probably one that maybe you're not expecting. I would say Perry Fisher, but also I don't think that's that bold of a take if he's starting at outside corner, just because of his length and everything. I think, especially when we talk about pass deflections, I think that Perry Fisher could lead us in pass deflections. Jalen Husky could as well, but I'm going to say Perry Fisher does. In terms of interception, Glendon Miller's 6'4". I think Glendon Miller has a pretty good shot at leading us at interceptions next year. I think he has a pretty good opportunity to do that. But I'm looking at this team, the importance of turning over the ball, I do want to talk about a little bit. Obviously, it's football. It's always going to be an important part. If you remember last year, we started off the year like insane turning people over. We were turning over people left and right. We were getting pass deflections. We were getting all these different things last year in terms of the first couple of games. We were like first or second in the country. It was pretty crazy. But this year, this team, I don't think is as good. I just don't think it is as good. And I don't know if we can put up the same numbers on offense. So we might have to rely on the defense a little bit more for creating turnovers and giving it back to our offense to allow it to be easier on them. And so I think that this year it's going to be important to turn teams over to be able to take the ball away, because I don't think we have the same type of team. I don't think we have the same type of guys on the offensive side of the ball that is going to just give us the ability to just score 40 points or 30 points or whatever it may be. We don't have the all-time big-time passing leader. So when I talk about who's going to lead us in interceptions, I'm talking about it as kind of a fun segment, but I think it's important for us to not only create interceptions, but also turnovers in general, force fumbles, do whatever you can. And you can't forget, Donald Brown had 2 picks next year. I expect him probably not to have one again, but maybe he'll get one. I feel like he just had the ability to turn people over, forcing fumbles, interceptions. Donald Brown was a really good player for Maryland football, but I think it's really important that we turn over people next year. I don't think we have the same team, and if we want to be successful, we got to find other ways to do it, and I think that's one of the key ones that we could do. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.